All right, so I think we're ready, Jalen. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this July 15th, 2021 for a special finance officer and superintendent webcast. As we have some new news to share with you about the ARP ESSER and the application process and the allocations and some other important items as well. But before we get to that, I do also want to mention today is July 15th, and I know many of you are getting ready or in the process of closing out your fiscal year. And I've had several emails, and several of my staff have had emails as well about when you are going to have the opportunity to submit your AFR or preliminary AFR for into SEEK. And so today actually is the first day you're able to do that, because we've opened the window up and the final on behalf numbers are posted out there online for you now, and we have everything ready for you. And so today is the day. So now the window is open now, and as you know, July 25th is the day that they are due to us here at KDE. So if you have questions or if you have error messages that you need help with, feel free to let us know. But you are now able to go out and test the waters and put in some numbers, and hopefully you won't get any error messages. But today you're able to begin that process. So wanted to let you know that here at the front end. And also today, as usual in our Teams Live event, if you want to ask questions or and do those kind of things, you need to go up in the top right hand side of your screen there, and you should see a little question mark, and you can click that button, and it will show you the Q&A for this session. And then you can also type in your name, so if you have a question, that we are able to either specifically answer it to you or answer it for the audience and tailor it to your specific needs. And so in some cases, it may be a question that we want to answer outside the webcast itself, because it may be sensitive information, and so we will answer it outside. And that way, if you give us a name, we are able to attach that and reach out to you specifically. So that's how, excuse me, that's how you ask questions during our Windows Live event. And so starting us off today will be Ms. Robin Kenny talking about ARP ESSER, as you can see on the screen. And then, no, that's Kelly Foster, sorry, the application process for that. And then Ms. Robin Kenny will talk about the allocations, and then Jesse Carlton will end us up with maintenance of equity, which is everybody's favorite topic these days. And so after that, we'll answer questions, or we'll answer questions along the way. We'll just see how it goes and flows. And hope you will get as much information out of this as you can. And as always, the link to these webcasts is also a link to the recording. So if someone in your office or you yourself want to go back after this and say, hey, I missed that, or I wish I didn't really understand what they said, or I wish I would listen better or taken better notes, you can go back to the link in your invite and just click on that after this meeting is over, and you can watch the recording as well. So just want to let you know that that's available for you too. And I will now turn it over to Kelly for her good information.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. I will have to say I will have been with KDE 8 years in August, and this is my first finance officer webcast. So I'm kind of excited to be joining you guys this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly Foster, and I'm the Associate Commissioner of the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support. So you have probably worked with several of my staff members regarding federal funds previously, or school improvement grant. So just a little bit about me in case you're not familiar with me or the work in my office. And so I'm joining today to share some information with you all that has previously been shared with superintendents during the May and June superintendent webcast. And just like everything through COVID, as time goes on, we get a little bit more information from the federal government. And so just kind of wanted to share what's been previously shared, as well as some additional information that can help you moving forward with deadlines. And I think there may be some superintendents that are on here too. So some of this may be repeat with a little bit of additional info. So next slide, please. Okay, so talking about the ARP ESSER application components, and remember this, the ARP ESSER is the third pot of federal funds, and there are three areas of that application that I want to touch on. The first one is the Safe Return to In-Person Instruction and Continuity of Services Plan, and this is the piece that needs to be posted to the district website by July 31st, 2021. This needs to talk about how districts will seek to promote the health and safety of students and continue to provide high quality services to students should we see an increase in COVID-19 moving forward. One of the things that we talked about on the May and June superintendent's webcast is that you can kind of recycle, if you need to, your previous reopening plans that you used for the 2021 school year and maybe update those so you don't have to start from scratch. We've also had the question come in about these plans of, do they need to be approved by your local Board of Education? In the federal requirements, there isn't anywhere that it says it has to be approved by your local board. I think I probably would definitely want to share that with my local board and get their feedback. But the key piece is getting that posted to your website by July 31st, 2021. The other piece is the ARP ESSER LEA plan. We had to submit an SEA plan to the feds, and we are going back and forth right now trying to get that final plan approved. But the LEA plan is due to KDE by July 31st, and in a few minutes I'll show you the inbox, the email address that you need to send that to. But the ARP ESSER plan outlines how the district will use its ARP ESSER funds. And one thing to keep in mind on this, and we've shared this previously, but maybe it hasn't gotten down to the finance officers yet, this doesn't have to be a line item budget exactly where you're spending every dollar. This can just be a narrative. We're going to use our funds for learning loss. We're going to use our funds for PPE. It can just be in a narrative format. You do not have to have a line-by-line budget for the July 31st submission. And then the spending plan and insurances into GMAP, which I know you all work with those on a regular basis. This is due in GMAP by August 31st, your spending plan and your assurances. And the insurances were created, there's a list of the required actions a district must implement throughout the life of the grant. And the spending plan is where you will see your detailed budget. And I know there's been some questions about, well, why are these due on different dates? Well, originally everything was due by the U.S. Department of Education on July 31st, 2021, but we were able to get an extension on the detailed budget and the assurances, the spending plan and the assurances, due to the fact that we had the issue with the foster care and our allocations were adjusted. So that's why those two pieces are due on different dates. The actual LEA plan is due on the 31st, and the spending plan and the budget are, or excuse me, the spending plan and assurances are due August 31st. Next slide, please. Okay, thinking about the submission of the plan, in accordance with the new information we received from US Ed a couple weeks ago, each district will be required to submit their ARP ESSER plan to KDE for review. We did not think that you guys were going to have to do that, so we shared this message out a couple weeks ago in a superintendent's email and also in the Monday email as well. So that's why this change was made. It's not KDE wanting to collect one more thing. In order for us to get the state plan approved, in order for you all to receive your funds, we have to collect those LEA ARP ESSER plans, and we also have to review those. And KDE will be reviewing for completion and compliance with the ARP ESSER program. And we're going to talk about what we're looking for, and that's not new information either. Next slide, please. Okay, you may recognize some of this information, especially superintendents. You've seen this before when we talked about the 4 parts of the ARP ESSER plan, and I'll go through those. They must include a discussion of the extent to which and how funds will be used to implement prevention and mitigation strategies consistent with the CDC guidance on reopening schools. So keep in mind, we're just talking about a narrative here in this part. It does not have to be a line item budget. And if you haven't seen CDC's new guidance that was released on Friday from the CDC, and then also this Monday in the Monday email, there's a blurb in there that links you to that guidance. The second bullet talks about how the LEA will use funds to address the academic impact of lost instructional time through the implementation of evidence-based interventions, how the LEA will spend the remainder of its funds. Remember, just a narrative, not a line item budget in this piece, and how the LEA will ensure that interventions address the academic impact of lost instructional time and respond to academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of all students. And once again, you may have some of this information already in reopening plans or presentations to your local board that you can tap into and not have to start from scratch. Additionally, plans must include relevant citations for each evidence-based practice listed in the plan, a description of how the district conducted meaningful consultation with the required stakeholders, and how they took that feedback into account when crafting the plan. So we have talked to you guys about evidence-based practices before, and if you just go to KDE's website and search evidence-based practice, you'll see lots of resources from my office that can help you around the evidence base, and there'll be some contact information towards the end with my policy advisor, Matthew Courtney, who is our expert guru on evidence-based practices, and he can help with that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, meaningful consultation. So we talked about meaningful consultation in the May and June superintendent's webcast, but I wanted to kind of go over that again with you guys because over the last several weeks, we have started to hear from different groups and organizations with questions about meaningful consultation and people feeling like local districts are not reaching out to them to provide them the opportunity for meaningful consultation. So I thought it was really important that we cover that one more time because one of the areas that we will look at when your plan comes in, and it was the 4 bullets from the previous slide, talks about the meaningful consultation. So we need to just make sure that everyone understands, how that works and what is the requirement. So part of the American Rescue Plan, the ARP plan, districts are required to conduct that meaningful consultation in the development of your plan. And when you draft your plan, districts must include a description of how they perform the meaningful consultation and how the information generated from the consultation was taken into account with developing the plan. So we're not doing a very deep review of these plans when they come in. We're going to look and make sure that you've have something in each one of the categories. We're not going to go through the category and say, well, you need more here, or you need less there, anything like that. We're just ensuring that all of the requirements of the ARP plan are there. So if you submit a plan and you're in that plan, there's nothing about there's not a description about how you conducted the meaningful consultation and how that consultation was used to help develop the plan, we're going to send that back to you and say, how did you do meaningful consultation? How did the information that you received during the consultation, how was that used to develop the plan? So please make sure whoever in your district is responsible for that is ensuring that that's occurring. Districts must make a good faith effort to consult with students, families, school and district administrators, educators and their unions, civil rights organizations, and stakeholders representing the groups of children from historically disadvantaged groups. KDE did not create that criteria. That is written out in the ARP information from Ed and from the law. These are the groups that you have to have good faith effort when trying to do that meaningful consultation. Okay, next slide. Considerations for consultation. So once you've made the effort to ensure that you've sought that feedback from a broad representation of your community stakeholders, then you should make it a priority to take that input and make that part of your ARP ESSER planning process. You must consult with the collective bargaining units, or in lieu of a collective bargaining unit, the professional organization or association representing the largest share of educators in the district. And districts may include past and ongoing consultation that you've done with groups throughout the COVID-19 time. So, if you brought groups in or did a survey back in March or April about reopening of school, you can use that information as well. Okay, next slide, please. And my last slide talks about just a reminder that they're due on 5 o'clock on July 31st. There is the email address that you need to send your plans to. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Matthew Courtney is the policy advisor in my office who is going to be taking questions around the plan. So if you have a specific question about something in your plan, or am I on the right track, you can reach out to Matthew and he will provide any assistance needed to you. And I'll be on the call at the end for questions, and I believe Matthew will be as well. So I will now turn it over to Robin.
Actually, we have just 3 or 4 questions. So do we want to go ahead and knock those out, or do you want to, Robin, you want to go ahead and do yours?
Sure, we can go ahead and do some questions. I'll stay on in case I can help in any way.
Okay. All right. The first one is, where do we submit the LEA plan?
So right there on the screen, that second bullet, there's the email address you submit the plan to. That one was easy.
Yep. There you go. And I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the questions for the most part. Do the EBPs need to be in narrative form like they do for the SIF grants, or the citation of the study that supports it as an EPB?
Matthew, you want to take that one?
Sure. So for this program, just the citation is sufficient.
Okay. What if a consultation has not happened as of yet?
Then you need to get to consulting between now and July 31st.
Okay. And then the last one is up here. Is KEA considered a union?
It is considered, let's see, what was the language that we put in there? The professional association representing the largest share of educators in your district. So yes, you would definitely want to consult with your local KEA.
All right. Well, that's what we have for now. So yeah, stick around. We may have some more, but we'll pass it along to Robin.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please. We're going to talk a little bit about revised ESSER allocations for ARP, and I'm really put this in here just out of an absolute abundance of caution. If you could go to the next slide, please. So let me backtrack just a little bit, and this communication has gone out several times to make superintendents and districts aware of a hiccup. I will call it a hiccup in our allocations for ARP ESSER. So in June, we received information from the U.S. Department of Ed that reporting data that is typically handled and submitted on behalf of Kentucky, that is done from the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, they went back and they're looking at data like many times we all do, trying to make sure data is correct. And they recognized an error in their submission of foster child care counts. So they had to resubmit those. They actually report to Health and Human Services, CHFS does, but then Health and Human Services then shares that information with US Ed in the calculation of Title I allocations. And so it's a data point that's used in those calculations. As such, because that Title I is also sort of the methodology that was used to calculate ESSER funds and GEAR funds and other upcoming Title I funds, adjustments had to be made. So there is a notation on this slide to show you that there's more detailed information that was found. It went out in Commissioner Glass's money message on July 6th. So you can click on that and read that in more in detail, but wanted to make sure that all finance officers were aware of this adjusted allocation amount. You can go out on the KDE webpage for your federal allocations, and you'll see those adjustments that have been made. Even though this really impacted multiple programs, US Ed decided in order to make that adjustment to our allocations They were primarily going to focus on ARP ESSER for the allocation in the last third that has not yet been distributed to the states, has not been freed up. So I just really wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of this, that you've had an opportunity to go out and look at those new allocation amounts if you haven't already. Also understanding that lots of districts have already looked at their budgets for the next school year. If you need to make adjustments to your budget, make sure you're using the correct numbers. In your planning, that you're using the correct numbers again. It's an unfortunate thing that happened. However, again, we didn't really have any choice in this reallocation amount, and just want to make sure that everyone is aware that it's out there. Again, we've publicized this multiple times, but just out of an absolute abundance of caution, I wanted to make sure that people are aware of it. Next slide, please. The remainder of our presentation today, we're really going to focus on something that's new. It's called maintenance of equity. And it was not in our earlier ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 allocations, but here's this new thing called maintenance of equity. We've talked about this at a very high level just to kind of have it as a placeholder in people's minds that it's a new thing that we'll have to deal with. But really today we're going to spend some time trying to flesh out exactly what we know about maintenance of equity and how it's going to work. Next slide, please. As a reminder, we are only talking about, this is only applicable to the American Rescue Plan Act and ESSER funding associated with that. I think we're all getting very familiar with what ARP ESSER is, and the funding is designed to assist certain things. Kelly's done a good job talking about some of the LEA plan requirements. I also would call your attention on this slide just to the full text of the American Rescue Plan Act that we have at the very bottom in case you want to actually read directly from the Act. Next slide, please. The other reason in making sure that you have looked at your new allocations from ARP ESSER, when that new allocation amount has come down, we think about in the context of the 90% that is coming to you, how you have to do your reservations of your 20% for learning loss. So you will be applying those percentages against a new allocation number. So think about that as well as you're building your budgets and thinking about your plans. Next slide, please. The state does have ARP ESSER requirements as reflected on this screen. Kelly's talked about some of those. We have to review your LEA plans and budgets. We have to allocate those amounts to the local school districts. We have to maintain state maintenance of effort, which is something that many districts are familiar with. So at the state level, we are concerned about maintenance of effort. But there you see in that fifth bullet down, we are looking at maintenance of equity. We have to do that from a state level as well as from a district level. Next slide, please. We're really going to focus more on maintenance of effort at the local school district level for today's presentation. We have already talked about maintenance of effort at the state level. So, and lots of you are familiar with that. It is our requirement to make sure that states are not using the ARP ESSER funds to really reduce our state financial support. So we'll be monitoring that at the state level. But as a reminder to you at your district level, those maintenance of efforts for your other programs, whether you're talking about IDEA or other federal programs, it still is a required maintenance of effort at the local level as well. Next slide, please. So let's start and talk about maintenance of equity. We thought the easiest way to kind of get us started was to talk about both state level requirements of maintenance of equity and district level requirements of maintenance of equity. And we do have those requirements at the very bottom of this slide that says where you can look exactly at the Act and read what it says. Of course, we've received additional guidance from US Ed at this point. So when you go to the ARP Act, it's in there, but you really have to dig a little bit deeper for you to really get into the meat of what this means. At the state level, we are looking at highest poverty LEAs, so our local school districts with highest poverty and our highest need LEAs. But then at the district level, we're going to look a little differently. We're going to look at high poverty schools and we're going to base it upon two factors, a spending test and a staffing test. So the bottom line is kind of what you all need to be concerned with as we move forward. I'm now going to turn it over to Jessie Carlton, our Assistant Director in the Division of District Support Services. Next slide, please. And Jessie's going to talk to us. She's going to get a little more into the meat. So Jessie is the person that you typically talk to about data and how we're going to pull data and what to pull and what not to pull and all the questions that come along with that. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessie, and she'll start with district level maintenance of equity.
Thanks, Robin. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to dive in a little bit and tell you what we know so far about this maintenance of equity requirement that's going to be on the districts. First and foremost, it is going to apply to all Kentucky districts. In there it says, every district must maintain this equity between your high poverty schools and your LEA as a whole. And we're going to be looking at two separate things as measured by per pupil funding and FTE staff per pupil in those schools. So the data that you're going to be looking at is going to compare fiscal year 21, which is for the 2021 school year, to fiscal year 22, which is this coming school year. And then you'll need to do it again for fiscal year 23. So like we've said, talking about your budgets and everything for all of the other requirements, fiscal year 22 doesn't start, has started, I guess, 15 days ago. But you've already formulated your funding, but you're going to need to keep kind of these requirements in the back of your mind, because like other things, you may need to be examining this to see if you need to go back and change some of your allocations or consider some other things due to this maintenance of equity requirement now. It is important to note that no deadline has been established for districts to identify their high poverty schools or pull all of this data together. But USAID keeps telling us, you're going to hear more from us. So in everything that we're kind of trying to, read the tea leaves and figure it out, I think when it does come, it's going to come quickly and say, we've told you about this and now we need, this data due by this date. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to get out kind of ahead of this today and say, here's what we do know. There will be some questions that we may not know all the answers to, but we'll get that back to you as soon as we can. All right, next slide, please. So at the district level, what are these high poverty schools? Okay, so high poverty schools are those schools in your district that are in the highest quartile based on the school's percentage of economically disadvantaged students. So when you take all of your schools and you rank them for highest to lowest based on that free and reduced lunch student count, we're looking at that top 25%. They're giving you two ways for districts to determine their high poverty schools. You can do it district-wide or by grade span. And what this means is if you look at it district-wide, it means you're going to calculate that percentage, economically disadvantaged students at the school, for all your schools in the district, and you're going to rank them from highest to lowest, and then you'll pick your top quartile, regardless of what type of school they are. So this means like in a larger district, all of your highest poverty schools may end up being elementary schools because they just all come to the top, okay? Now, the other option is to do this by grade span, which means you rank your schools based on your grade spans of elementary, middle schools, and high schools. So then after you group those together and do the rankings by economically disadvantaged students, you'll go back and you'll pick out the highest in each of those categories until you hit whatever number of schools you need to hit to get your quartile or your highest 25% of all your schools. Down there at the bottom, we're linking to, which is probably the most information we have on maintenance of equity right now, which is a FAQ document. And if you'll start around question 27, that kind of gives you examples of how to pull this district-wide or how to pull it by grade span. So you can look through and kind of see the pros and cons for your district, and it gives you really good examples of what it looks at, and will help you decide which way you want to pull that data. My plan is to pull for all districts the school level economically disadvantaged data from school report card, the latest we have, the membership data. I'm going to perform that calculation for you in the spreadsheet so that I'm going to send it out to everybody so you'll already have all of that pulled together. Now, once I pull that together, you're also going to need your funding information and FTE data that we'll talk about here in the next few slides. I'm hoping to make this kind of like the school report card spreadsheet that I send out for school report card bullet data, where you can drop some figures in there and hopefully it'll do some of these calculations for you. So that's what we're going to work it on. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, when you're looking at state funding for these schools, next question is going to be, okay, what's going to be included? So the state and local funds that they are looking at are the same funds, the same bucket of funds that we report on the school report card under total spending per student, state and local funds. So I know you have not done any of those school report card calculations yet for fiscal year 21 or 22, but it's the same group of funds that you look at for those calculations. So there's no capital outlay or debt service, no federal funds, no private donor funds. So we're kind of looking at the same group to keep it consistent. Next slide, please. Okay, so not only are we looking at funds, we're also looking at FTE staffing in those same high poverty schools. This is all staff, instructional, non-instructional, contract staff, and also you need to account for staff that may split their time between schools. And those are going to need to be included proportionally. So you may end up with a school that has, you know, a number of 0.5 staff per building because they've split between two schools. What they're looking at here is that districts cannot reduce the number of FTE staff per pupil by an amount that exceeds the district-wide reduction of FTE staff per pupil. So once again, you can look at this district-wide or by grade span, and it'll give you some examples of that around question 30 on the frequently asked questions. And if you're doing this district-wide, what you're going to do is you're going to take the number of FTE staff in the district and you'll divide that by the number of students in the district for fiscal years 21 and 22. If there is a reduction in staff between those years, the reduction in staff at any of your high poverty schools can only have the same reduction per pupil that happened district-wide. So for example, if district staff were reduced by 5 FTE staff per pupil, then when the calculation is done at the high poverty schools, that can also only be reduced. Your staffing at your high poverty school can also only be reduced by 5 FTE staff per pupil or less to maintain that equity. Next slide, please. Exemptions. Okay, so whenever there is a requirement, everybody kind of asks, okay, what are the exemptions? Does everybody have to do this? We do have 4 exemptions that they have given us, but I will say it's important to note that we have been told numerous times on webcasts and in documentation that these exemptions will be very few and far between. US Ed is going to be very selective on the districts that are granted these exemptions. If you think your district falls under one of these exemptions, please reach out to me. My email is there at the bottom. And we want to look at your case, because what we don't want to do is for you guys to think, yeah, I qualify for an exemption. And then when we submit it to US Ed, they say, no, that really isn't what we were thinking. And then you're kind of a little bit behind and have to scramble to catch up. You know, some of them are very straightforward. Option number 1 seems very straightforward. Enrollment of less than 1,000 students. Exemption number 2 says operates a single school. It may be a little trickier because you may have, you know, an elementary and a middle school in one building. And so you think, oh, well, I only have one school. I have a single school. But if you have 2 federal school codes, that's going to identify you as 2 schools, even though you are physically in one building. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is just an overview of what is required by the districts, kind of a bullet point of what all you're going to need. Right now, districts are being encouraged to make this data publicly available. We expect this to possibly become a requirement by US Ed. We just don't have all the information yet of what they're going to require. They keep telling us more documentation and more guidance is coming. So I would prepare to not only calculate this data, but have it where you can post it on your website or make it available. Going down through it real quickly, you know, you need to identify those high poverty schools. Then you're going to need to compare the state and local funding of those schools to the overall funding in the district. You're also going to need to compare the FTE staff counts of those high poverty schools to the FTE staff counts of the entire district. or the grade spans if you choose that pathway. Next slide, please. Like I've said, USED has said the additional guidance is coming soon. These are just a list of things that we don't know yet. We don't know exactly the state's role in enforcing these maintenance of equity requirements. We also don't know the annual reporting requirements on us at the state or you guys at the district. The only deadline that we currently have is that the state's list of high need and highest poverty LEAs, along with the state funding to those districts, is going to need to be provided to USED and posted publicly by July 31st. We have pulled those high need and high poverty schools, and we are working to get the funding data for each of those so that we can post them. I will say that, remember, no matter if you are on our list or not, if you are identified as a high need or highest poverty LEA, that has no bearing on whether you as a district need to do this maintenance of equity requirement for your schools. You will still need to do that. So like I said, we want to make sure we get you all the information we can so that you can start pulling some stuff together, and because we do kind of expect this may be a quick turnaround for providing and posting this data at the district level. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, last takeaways. District must maintain fiscal equity and staff equity in the highest poverty schools in the districts. We know that districts are going to need to compile this data to make sure equity is maintained, and we expect to receive guidance in hopefully the near future on what must be reported or posted. Last slide, please. And this is just a link to that frequently asked questions document, which is kind of the nuts and bolts of what we have to go on right now. And then also there's a use of funds frequently asked questions there. As Steve said, I think you can come back and watch this video afterwards. I'm also going to see, as Steve, I think if we post this in the Teams link, you'll be able to access this presentation so that you can access.
I'll do that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so then that's going to be kind of like a one-stop shop for everything. If you have any questions, we won't have to email it back out. You can always go to that link to get the presentation or watch it again if you like. So I think that's all on this end. Robin, we're going to go back. Do you have anything else or just go into questions?
All right, there's
I think we can go into questions, but thank you, Jesse, for a really good overview of what we know at this point. I would encourage people to go to these two resources that are listed on this last slide. A lot of the questions, there are examples in there, and it's really hard to kind of conceptually talk about this without like doing the math. And so I would encourage everybody to take a look at the maintenance of equity requirements FAQs and the use of funds so that you can got to get a feel for it. I know that when we first started reading about it and started reading these documents, we were kind of scratching our head and going, okay, we're not really sure what this looks like. But I would encourage you to take a little bit of time, go through the documents and read them. And then of course we would be available after you've had a chance to review as well to answer additional questions. So Steve, do we have questions in the chat?
We do have a couple, but I think Jesse has quite handily answered them already. But I'll go ahead and answer. I'll go ahead and shoot them out there just so everybody knows that we answered them. What if we don't have any high poverty schools?
I don't think it's an option for you not to have any high poverty schools. Everybody will, because no matter, even if your schools have very, very low economically disadvantaged percentages, you know, you still have the top quartile. You know, your top quartile or your top 25%, they may only have, you know, 1, 2, 3% of these economically disadvantaged kids, but there's still a little bit there. They're still your highest quartile.
Mm-hmm. All right. And this is a good question. Is there a specific date we need to use to determine the ranking list like we do for Title I?
Right. What we're going to use, one of our questions that we're, wanting to reach out to USED, when all of the documentation for frequently asked questions, it keeps telling us to use the best, most current data we have. For right now at this moment is, what's out on school report card, because the 2021 data has yet to be posted yet. So what I will be sending you guys when I pull this data together will be the 1920 data.
Yeah.
Your 1920 counts, because that data's been out on school report card. It was reviewed by DPPs and others to validate. So we feel confident that we can take that economically disadvantaged number divided by the membership that was checked and get you a good percentage.
All right. Any more questions from folks out there? That's all I have to see on the board.
Steve actually had one emailed to me.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is very specific. There was another option on the slide that I did not talk about exemptions. And it's because we don't really know yet. So there was an exemption talking about if you had only one school within the grade span. And so if you do only have one school that's in elementary, one school that's in middle, one school that's in high school, we didn't want to kind of tell you, yes, that's going to be an exemption for you, because that's, we need to take that specific example and we'll send it in to USED to have them give the final say of yay or nay. So I've received your email on that one. So anybody else who falls into that, we'll get the answer for that. I'm sure there will be documentations and frequently asked questions from us that will reach back out to you. But if you are also in that category, shoot me an email so I make sure I respond to you.
All right. Oh, we just got two more that came. Let's see here. See what we got. I don't think this will affect it. What if we've opened a new school since the school report data was posted? I don't know that that matters. I think you're still going to go with what has been posted in 1920, right?
Right, and I see what they're asking. They're saying, where do I get the data from if I'm a new school?
Yeah.
That's a question I don't know.
Yeah, I know that's a
Look at, because
a unique question.
Yeah, that's a very unique question. You don't have any data for that school. I would think that those would probably fall to the bottom of your list because there's no data for those, so they wouldn't be in your top quartile.
Yeah.
We can get some verification on that to send out as well.
Okay. All right, here's one. How would a CEP district calculate poverty schools?
Same way as everyone else. You still should have economically disadvantaged numbers, because even if you're, we use those numbers for a lot of other things. We use those for seek at risk. We use those for E-rate. Even if you're a CEP school, you should be pulling in those HIF forms, and all of those kiddos who have direct search, they should still count in there. So you should still have a number of CEP schools. You'll have a number of economically disadvantaged students.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, so this is just a clarification. So we, KDE, is going to provide who the high poverty schools are, right?
We will provide you a list of your schools with the economically disadvantaged count, the membership count, and the percentage. It will then be the district's choice how they kind of organize those schools and break them down. Because remember, there's two ways to identify them. You can identify district-wide, looking at all the schools and just taking the top quartile, or you can break them down by grade span and just look at your elementaries, look at your middles, look at your highs. So that'll be your all's decision. I can get you the data and pull it all to one place, but then it'll be your all's decision of how you identify those. And on that frequently asked document right there, the one on the top, it goes through both examples. So don't want to sway you one way or the other on which path to pick, but it would probably be good for you to take a look at it. Now, if you only have 4, 5, 6 schools, I would say you're going to look district-wide. You're not a big district, but your larger districts may want to look at the grade span option.
And Jesse, is it correct to say you may want to run it both ways and see where you end up?
Yes, it could be that way, because you identify these schools and then you start looking at the funding. So if you were to level one and a school may not look quite as favorable as you need it to look, then you could run it the other way to see if there's another school that you want to include instead.
All right. We got another one. I think it's from the same it's geared toward the same question about the CEP district. They're saying that their new school is Title I and CEP, so they'll likely fall in the top quartile, they say. So they still won't show up in the school report card, though.
Right, they still won't be there. And so, we can only rank schools based on the data we have. And, especially if it's a brand new school and we don't, you haven't done your direct cert pulls, you haven't done any of this gathering of this free and reduced lunch information. So there's no real way to kind of gather the percentage that new school would be. So I can't imagine they're going to ask us to try and fit them into this quartile when we don't know the data for that school.
Yeah, just unlikely or unfortunate timing for a new school for this particular circumstance. Yeah. Right.
And similarly, you may have a school that was open in 1920 that is no longer open now. So when I send you the list of schools, that may be one of the first things you want to do, because you don't want to, you can't pull this year's funding or FTE data for a school that no longer exists. So you'll want to pull all of those schools out.
Yeah.
So Jesse, you always do such a good job with our districts in trying to give them instructions when you send this information out. So we're going to ask Jesse once again, just like she does with school report card or other data information that you're asked to do, when she pulls this information, she will have an instruction sheet that'll try to help you think through exactly the processes. I still encourage you to go and look at the examples in the documents, the resource documents that we've provided on this last slide, but we'll try to also provide you some instructions that'll help you with your information and data pull. Not to put a spot there or anything, Jess.
No, that's okay. But I would also like to say I do appreciate the fact that finance officers, a lot of you all have been with for a very long time, and there are a lot of you guys who get my instructions or my spreadsheets or whatnot, and you'll call me and you'll say, do I have to use this? Because people think about things differently. So if you read the FAQ and say, I don't know what that girl is doing with that spreadsheet and whatnot, as long as you can follow the FAQ, identify these schools and calculate this data, you do not have to use our documentation. But if you want to, we're going to try and lay it out for you to say, here's the steps you need to take. Oh, Steve, I think we've lost you.
I had muted, sorry. Let me bring this last question, or next question. It is. All right, so we're providing some information out to the districts on high poverty. When is it due back to KDE?
That's what we don't know yet.
Yeah, okay.
The feds have told us, hey, you're going to have to maintain equity and look at your funds and your staffing, and here's all the things you're going to need to pull together, and we're going to encourage you to make it publicly available. But there is, we expect reporting dates and timelines of when you need to make this publicly available to show up, but we don't have any of that yet. As you'll read down through the FAQ, it says in multiple spaces, more guidance and timelines to come, more guidance and timelines to come.
Yeah.
So
also, when is our information going to be available to them?
Our state information? I'm sorry.
It's kind of like, that's the second part of the question.
Our state information will be posted and emailed out to you guys before our requirement is to post our highest public schools.
Okay.
So Jesse, I think the question was, when will you pull the information for each district to send out to them?
I will pull it. So I hope to get it to you guys next week. How about that?
So one thing that I would add, and Jesse's absolutely correct, we don't have that date by which, but if you think about it, just like anything, if you have to either amend your budget or I would encourage you to do the analysis at least as quickly as you can, Because if you have to make adjustments, the further you wait into the year, it's harder to make any kind of adjustments. So you might want to get kind of advance on that, take a look. I would not wait until we come and say US Ed says you have to post this somewhere. I think as soon as Jesse can get this information out to you, if you'll start looking at it, that's going to generate some questions, probably for all of us. It's going to take us some time to work through it, as it's a new requirement. We've never done it before. It's going to take a little bit. So I would encourage you not to just place it on the back burner and wait until someone comes knocking and says, hey, you really have to do this now. Start looking at the information, the data, and then whether you need to make any adjustments based upon the maintenance of equity requirements. It's easier to do it as early as possible if you have to do it at all.
All right.
Do we have any other questions, Steve?
Well, let's see. It's still going back to the CEP and the new school and the Title I. It said in the new school, the data is coming from the students who are being redistricted.
So I guess for that one, I guess what I would say, because that is a really good question, the question about the new school, and we don't have data to look back to. I don't know that we're going to be able to answer a lot of those questions specifically to new schools until we get some guidance and direction up from US Ed. I appreciate very much whoever raised this question, because that allows us to then send that question to US Ed, and we'll do that through Dr. Foster's office, who is our primary contact office. But as soon as we can get sort of a preliminary question on that, and please go ahead and send these other questions to us so that we can kind of wrap them all into this new school question all at once. The more clarity or more detail that we can give to US Ed when we ask the question, the better. So I don't know that we'll be able to answer a lot of questions surrounding the new school today.
And that's all we have right now. So we'll be glad to, well, if you want to close it, or I can close it, either way.
Be happy to, unless Steve, do you have anything else that you need to share with the finance officers?
No more announcements at this time.
Okay, thank you. Again, want to thank you so much for joining in. We did not have a superintendent's webcast in July. Tried to give everybody a break from us for a month, but we really felt like we couldn't wait to share this information on maintenance of equity and our ARP ESSER plan submissions that Dr. Foster told us about today. Please continue to share this information with those in your district that need to be aware of it. And it's almost time to start school again. So appreciate very much. We know that summer learning's going on in a lot of your districts. Appreciate so much the efforts of all the local school districts, central office staff, teachers, and all the other people that are working with our students over the summer. And it'll be time for school to start for the fall before we know it. Hope all of you have had a chance to take a little bit of a break over the summer. And once again, just appreciate all that you do for Kentucky kids. Thank you so much, and we'll see you the next time.